Hey everyone, how are you guys doing today?
Doing great. Not from East Denver. Going live. Ready to get started.
Yeah, same here. So this space has been anticipated for a week or so now, but the scheduling errors kept happening. So super stoked we're doing this one. I see you in the crowd there, Peanut. Thanks for joining. OGB, thanks for joining. Hopefully more of us get on. If you guys have any questions for AppLayer or us, please just raise your hand. Always happy to have people up here. So I'm just going to do a quick intro and then we'll kick it off. So today we're going to dig into what building fast means these days, especially with AI. It's something crazy. App Layer is building something crazy too. So we want to bring it all to the forefront. But the mechanics of the decisions, feedback loops, there's a lot of questions around what happens with AI and shipping new products. So we're going to use real examples, which is App Layer. It'll let us know how things actually work in the real world with all of that. Cool. So do you want to give us a quick intro, App Layer, and then we'll dig into it?
Yeah, and I'm sure there will be more people listening in on the recording after this. Good to get started here. I'm Michael. I'm one of the two co-founders of AppLayer. I mostly work on the business side, although I am technical. Also leading projects which include our AI product, which enables people to build with just an idea and build out a fully fledged 100% on-chain decentralized app. And that's basically being paired with our blockchain, which we've been building for about 4 years now. A lot of frameworks are kind of little pieces of the framework and different technologies that we've been building since 2017. It essentially enables us to put everything and anything on chain. And that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to blockchain, is that there's no real use case outside of a financial primitive. And we're essentially enabling microtransactions in our economy. And it basically makes it where you can just have a digital wallet on your phone and literally everything in your life can be driven by blockchain. And everything behind that transaction is executed by the blockchain, making it fully transparent and showing what is actually happening when you do use a product or service. And so that has been our mission since 2017, is to be able to build these fully on-chain products and services where we can have a fully decentralized world in its truest form. And so that kind of brings us to today, where we now have these AI products that can fully build out all of these products building products. But happy to dive into it.
Awesome. Yeah, I swear in the last week even, just everything is moving so fast now. We're getting to a point where well, I think one of the next big thing that we're going to see is AIOS. So you just open your computer, your laptop, and you just type in what you're going to work on, and it will generate software, something like that. I don't know. The future's getting wild real fast.
That's the new narrative, is instead of SaaS companies selling products, you now have essentially a SaaS company, but it's an AI product generator company that makes these tools that you would normally pay a subscription for. And now you can run them locally at your businesses, have people making tools specific to their needs. And that's essentially what we're enabling with our tooling as well. You have an idea that you want in a fully decentralized form. You need the smart contracts for it. Our AI basically generates the whole stack for you.
Yeah, that's crazy. I took a brief look. I didn't try out AppLayer. Is it actually live? Can I go?
So it's in closed alpha right now. And so it's essentially invite only. We have a referral system in the back end where current users will be granted referral codes that you send out to friends. We'll have people sharing those around in the coming weeks. But right now, it's a very small pool of users, and we're getting through a lot of different bugs that kind of came up in the software, perfecting the deployment pathing for smart contracts, integrating some of the different networks that we want to be able to deploy on. And so right now, what we have is a pretty perfected product. It's going to be interesting to see how it scales with some of the back-end systems that we deployed. And so we're going to slowly bring in some users and see how much it takes and what changes need to be made as we scale from a small handful of users to hundreds of thousands of users, essentially.
Yeah, I think that's
Incredible.
as you scale a product like that, inevitably something will break. It just has to be have
Exactly.
your hand in the past to fix it. But I think the infrastructure in which you've built is incredible. We're all here, everybody in this space, and everybody listening to it. There's a reason we all are here, and it's because we believe in the blockchain and everything now being on chain and having an app which you've just built. I think is such a positive thing for the space. Kudos to you guys. You've been building for so long. There's so many builders that come, they get scared after a couple of months, even years, but you guys have kept on grinding. And I think that is an incredible feat. Hats off to you guys.
Absolutely. Yeah. So basically, the main reason I do these, well, we do these spaces is, and we bring founders on, is because founders are pushing the boundaries of what's like possible right now, building what the world wants to see next. And I think this is the best way to get alpha, the best way to like really understand the boundaries of technology, business, and where the market is going. And so, yeah, definitely hats off to you guys for doing exactly that. But I want to attack like some of the common misconceptions around AI and building and the market and where it's at. So one of my questions is actually, why do most builders think speed is coming from better tools or infra? I don't think it's necessarily just the tools that people need, but there's also another layer to it of if you just build stuff, nobody comes or nobody knows about it, or it's just useless. It's not actually going to add value to people's lives. I just want to pop the hype bubble a little bit and basically ground people in the reality a little bit of what it actually takes to make something that people want. Maybe you could speak a little bit about that, Michael?
Yeah, we're consistently going through a feedback loop or cycle with a lot of our community. And that was tying into our AI product. But then this goes for any business, really. Like early on, more than a decade ago, I was running a different company. And as we were slowly scaling up, it eventually became hyperbolic to the point where, it was $10,000 in revenue to hundreds of thousands of dollars in revenue within months. And that was like monthly revenue. And so it all comes down to listening to your customer. One, like, what is it that they want and how can you solve that? But as we're building like these AI products that you're building for yourself, and the AIs create an echo chamber where they're like, yeah, that's a really great idea. You should run with this and spend the next year of your life pushing it. And it could be the worst idea ever. And we see a lot of that. And so I think we do need to come back to the fundamentals of core business principles where you have an identified customer and they have a problem that they want to solve, and there's nothing that solves it currently. And that's what a lot of these different AI app builder tools do, but in much smaller forms from like business operations perspectives. And I think it's more blatant in blockchain than in more conventional like Web2 startups, where we can just come out with a product and raise millions of dollars from the community, which isn't happening right now, but was happening, and no one was using it. And that also is what's happening with a lot of these layer twos that are in the market right now. And I think it was like 3 weeks ago where people were looking into the metrics of a lot of these layer ones and layer twos and seeing that their activity is at all-time lows. And it really just comes down to that there's too many of them. People pour tons of money into them and they're not really solving problems. The problem that they were solving before was scale. And everyone has already figured out how to solve that. And so now you have all of these ghost chains where they're just a copy of a copy and nothing's happening. And that's essentially the opposite of what we're doing. Like, we built our blockchain from the ground up so we can do more useful things on chain. And it's more of an education issue that we have than anything else. But yeah, like even Solana was having all-time low in terms of transaction volume. The only thing that's happening on that chain is prediction markets right now.
Yeah, Solana's a gambling chain. Funny, but
ultimately it's market dependent as well. There's not a lot of traction in the Web3 market in terms of L1s, swaps, and transaction things of that nature. But it happened before in the past, and it will happen again in the future. It's just the part of the cycle in which we're in right now.
yeah, there's something I'm interested in about app layer just clearing up. So you generate apps on the blockchain, right? But what kind of apps can you generate exactly? Is it anything like I could generate and create the next X or the next Facebook or something? And why would that need to be on the blockchain?
One, if you have a social media company and your whole business is predicated on selling your users' data, that is a huge product that could solve a privacy issue in terms of sellable data,
Right.
or showing whose data is actually being used for whatever purpose. Having an open ecosystem where it's basically taking that data that would normally be sold off to the highest bidder is now in the hands of the user. The user owns the data, and the user can opt and choose to sell their own data if they want. And that is the purpose of the open source or ecosystem or product. And if we were to do something like Facebook, which I don't know, I wouldn't say it's the best product or use case for Web3. But there are some use cases in what I mentioned where data is probably the biggest concern. But for app layer specifically, like we have a lot of commercial engagements where we're building private permissioned blockchains. And that's where the industry has gone for blockchain companies who have built infrastructure. I think our bigger of all the competitors is probably Hyperledger, where they have similar infrastructure to what we created as open source. And theirs is more closed source for a lot of their products. But essentially, what we have is the ability to create what we call precompiles. And precompiles are not anything that's new in the market by any means, but you've never been able to create your own precompile as a smart contract. And so essentially what we enable is anyone to build these precompiles where they could tank millions and millions of transactions a second for highly complex compute arguments or functions. And you can build essentially what is currently on cloud on chain in a fully open ecosystem.
I think I'm having trouble understanding exactly the role of the chain versus the cloud. If they're essentially like the same thing, right? Like you would just be the way I would host on like a private server or an instance or whatever, I could host an app on that, but I could do the same thing on the blockchain.
Yeah, so the big difference here is going to be one is being hosted by a large multinational corporation who is highly centralized and is profiting off of
Like
huge
AWS.
usage of their services. Yeah, and there are a lot of cases where AWS goes down or Azure goes down or Google Cloud goes down. And there's no redundancy to that. And we've seen that a lot. And so with a blockchain, we on our validator side do use some cloud services. Our company personally doesn't, but to host validators, so there's a lot of people who do use cloud services, and there's blockchains who heavily rely on cloud services to power their networks. And in those cases, they need more decentralization if those issues do arise. And so if you have a Web2 app that you're hosting in AWS and AWS goes down, your product is down.
Yeah.
And on blockchain, that doesn't happen.
Yeah, that makes sense. An argument that we keep making is if you trace back almost any decentralized project, there's always a point of centralization. Like even MetaMask is a point of centralization. I remember there was a moment where they like blocked wallet access to a certain geographic region. But that's a big red flag, decentralization. So that's really important. That's a really good point. Yeah, it's definitely a bottleneck in everything. If you even think about computers you're using, like internet, it's like everything goes back to one giant cable under the ocean. Like it's crazy.
Yeah, and those cables are also being potentially monitored. So like a lot of the data that's flowing through them is very open to security risk in some cases.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I just think it's absolutely nuts how we have all this infrastructure, but there's always a choke point, almost always a centralized point where, like you said, there's no redundancy. Cloudflare goes down, like 90% of the internet's down, or maybe closer to 30 or 40, but still a lot. And that's something that needs to be addressed, I think.
There are some companies that are working on that. Like you have satellites in space holding the ledger of Bitcoin, the Ethereum, and communicating back and forth and having that redundancy there. But it's very expensive to be able to do. But you could also do the same thing with a satellite internet and the various services that offer that. But a little more off topic too.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so one of my next kind of segments, I guess, is I want to learn more about AI as a co-builder. And like AI is still pretty new and it's just moving so rapidly. The changes are happening so quick. But just to break it down, like what is the biggest change in working with, let's say, real developers or like real people instead of just vibe coding everything? Like, what is the biggest difference you've noticed? Is it speed? Have you noticed a difference in the quality of the code? Would like to learn more about that. I'm not a developer at all.
What I can say is pretty early on in the whole vibe coding space that a lot of the code base is turned into spaghetti code. And it's really hard to unravel that without AI assisting you once it's built in AI. And there are ways to construct an AI model to build code in a more easy to follow form. But if you're just using a pure model, GPT 5 point whatever, or Gemini 3 Pro, insert any model here, like without giving it explicit instructions of how it should be operating, it can create some messes. And what I found is that it'll create bugs for itself. And then once that bug is introduced, you're like trying to fix it just using vibe coding. You might not have any experience coding whatsoever. And you're telling it, hey, I have this bug, go fix it. And it sends you through like maybe 5, 10, 20, 30 attempts at fixing that bug. And it just keeps creating a bigger and bigger mess.
New bugs. Yeah.
And so that is an issue that I've seen with a lot of the models. What I can say is like using some of the newer models from like Google, like Gemini 3 Pro, and some of the newer versions of Claude, like they're definitely getting better and they're more exact. But I think the biggest thing that needs to be addressed when using these models for programming anything is giving them more context and being more explicit in what it is you want to build. Because like you'll build something, you'll just give it a simple idea, but then you know what you wanted in your head, but you didn't tell it to build it 100% the way that you wanted it. And then you're
Right.
introducing all of these new features, and those features were not part of the original build that it conceived of, and it's introducing new bugs because you introduced these new features that it didn't build for. And if we go back again to the core principles of software engineering, like the first step in any software being built should always be planning all of the features and how the features work, how the user flows go before you even touch any code. And that's something that is being largely skipped for vibe coders. And then going on to another segment of this, like we used to contract out a lot of our prototype builds to various platforms, like you used to be able to go to Fiverr or
Right.
I'm blanking on some of the other names, but you used to be able to go to these places and say, hey, I want to get this software built. And then people would send you offers and then they would build it. And most of the time, I would say 60 to 70% of the time, they would half bake it. And it just never was as expected.
Right.
And now we are able to skip that layer and just go and build the prototype ourselves. And that is the discussion today, is instead of spending weeks or months chewing glass with contractors who go and build our first prototype, if you're not a technical guy to build it yourself, you now can just go to an AI model and give it your whole implementation plan, all of your user flows, all of the pieces of art that you want on the website and everything else, the whole design, and it spits it out in a matter of seconds or minutes. And that is really powerful. But it also makes it where a lot of these people who learned how to program and have been in this industry for multiple years or decades are now almost useless. I mean, I would say the only people who are useful are the people who actually know how to code and debug code experts. And those guys are much more rare.
I think just one factor I think maybe we didn't mention there is the cost factor as well. It's a huge part of building any software, any code. It comes with high costing as well. So it means now that I would assume using something like your product, for example, the savings are huge.
Oh yeah, we could spit out a decentralized app in $2.
It's incredible. It really is incredible. I think that you do see a lot online, especially on Twitter and things like that. You see a lot of experienced coders who are very salty with these new discoveries, these new AI building software, building apps and things like that. It's because it's a real threat on their industry and on their jobs, and that's just the reality of the new generation which we're going into.
Yeah, but working for a large enterprise, like you cannot trust AI to build any of those systems. Like you are a bank or you're Microsoft and you have this infrastructure that millions or billions of people rely on every day, and you're securing their finances. This is even explicitly the crypto industry. You cannot trust AI to solely be the builder of your product. You can use it to help assist you, but you cannot trust it 100%.
Yeah, it makes sense. I'm curious, as you're building app layer, is there certain security measures that you implement in every build or anything like that as well? Is there, like you said, one of the issues with building is not thinking through enough at the beginning. Do you have any like processes that you help users with so that they do give it enough information?
One of the features that we built into AppLayer AI, the tool, is if you give it just a simple prompt and say, hey, I want to build an NFT marketplace, and that's your only piece of the prompt, like you can basically click an enhance button, and then it pulls from our AI model to basically create a simple implementation plan for that. So it's like step 1, step 2, here are the features that we need, all the things, and then you can basically look through that and revise it. And you can even enhance it further. But the more information that you give it, the better it will build. And it also goes into what we did to make this work for Web3 is creating Web3 scaffolds. So making it so someone who doesn't even understand how Web3 gets implemented or integrated can basically just come to us with a simple idea and deploy it to the blockchain in a matter of minutes. And this could be deployed to pretty much anything that is an EVM blockchain right now.
Got it. Okay, that's pretty cool. And then you also briefly mentioned that like you have your own like model or something there. Did you guys like make this from scratch?
No, we're pulling from
Okay.
bigger models that have been trained with billions of dollars training and hours and data. We don't have the resources for that, obviously. But
Makes
what we
sense.
did is build scaffolds on top of it. So it's like a context engine. So it basically,
Oh, got it. Okay.
yeah, it basically is a layer on top that steers it in the right direction.
Interesting. For some reason, that kind of makes me think of BitTensor. Have you heard of BitTensor before?
I've heard of BitTensor, but I'm not an expert on what they do.
Yeah, it's just like the base layer, and then there's 128 subnets or whatever, and they all build their own scaffolding on top, from what I understand. So that kind of method just makes me think of that,
Sounds
which
cool.
is interesting. Yeah, but no, that's really cool though. And then also, one thing that you mentioned is if you're a billion-dollar company, you wouldn't let AI necessarily go over everything. I'm curious specifically, like at what point do you think it's more valuable to have a human doing the work exactly versus just vibe coding everything? If I wanted to build something and I vibe coded it, like at what point should I be bringing someone in to help check the work or something?
The person who is using the vibe code tool, if I'm building a subsystem inside, let's say, a bank that is tasked with processing certain amounts of data or executing a trade or transfers of money from one person to the next, you need someone who is an expert in that domain. You need someone who knows how to code it without AI. And so at that point, the AI models are basically assisting that person and just writing the code quicker. But it needs to be good code, and it can't just be blind code. And I think that's what's been happening with like smaller startups and smaller SaaS companies who are bringing out these tools and sending it out to the ether and letting people use it. But what are the security implications, and what do you do after that? If you're starting to scale a vibe coded app, you need to bring in experts to make sure that it is secure. There are no bugs, and you need to keep testing. And they call them like red team security experts. And they do penetration testing and everything else. Like, you need people to be able to do that. And there are AIs that will do it as well, but the AI is only as good as the information it has. And there's always going to be something new that you didn't even think of that could be a security exploit in a system.
So the way I understand it, the way you're saying it, is vibe coding is best in the hands of someone that knows how to code and can actually, I guess, with a little bit of prompt engineering, pretty much know exactly what's going to be built.
It depends. It really depends. If you're just building a prototype, you don't need to know how to code a prototype. Like, you can build that product in minutes. And if you're working on a system that is being used by millions or hundreds of millions of users, and there's a huge business case where if that product goes down, you're losing millions of dollars, you need someone who knows how to fix the code. If it's bad code, review the code, make sure everything is good. And it's a slower process, but it's a much more secure process.
That makes sense. Sorry, someone raised their hand. Hey, Peanut, just approved you as a speaker. Feel free to chime in. Okay. But yeah, so at what point exactly is there like a revenue threshold that you think a product needs to hit in order to kind of shift? Let's say I made something, I made a vibe coded an app, and all of a sudden it just gets traction and people are just starting to flood in. Would you recommend like just redoing the whole thing with real coders?
I would recommend at least having someone view the whole code base and see where the holes are. But I'm sure you would find that some things would be breaking with a lot of people using a vibe coded app. And even like you can vibe code and scale. So if you say, hey, now I have 1,000 users on this thing and it's crashing, the AI will be able to tell you why it's crashing. And it'll be able to build these systems in the back end and segregate things to be able to scale it for you. At some point, if you're making millions of dollars on a product and it's stable income and you see it only going up and growing, then yeah, you probably want to bring in some professionals who made a career of programming similar systems. But you don't need a whole team. Your AI is the team. So instead of a team of 10 engineers, you just need one.
Yeah, that makes sense. Have you seen the new, I don't know, it came out 2 days ago or something, but someone claims to have released like Web 4.0, and that's an AI that edits its own code. Have you looked into that at all?
It's something that I was thinking would happen eventually. I don't know if it's called Web 4.0 or whatever, but I do see, and this is what all the AI companies are working towards, and what OpenAI was working towards is having AI models that eventually just grow and self learn and teach itself and self-create. So it's writing its own code and could have tools that it's using in the back end that is always being improved upon. Similar to what was happening with Claudebot, where it's all communicating and coming to a consensus of different systems that it wants to do to improve its own workflows. And you could just let it go free reign and approve those things. Yeah, and it's the next evolution of our AI-driven internet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just happening so fast. I think this was, I'm just checking, it's OX Sigil claims to have released that into the public February 17th, 2 days ago. These quote unquote, I built the first AI that earns its existence, self-improves, and replicates without a human. Yeah, it just as a new piece of news, but it basically, I think, is describing what you were talking about, someone that can edit the code, but now it can edit its own code. I wonder if that'll just make more of a mess of things, or if it might actually do a good job. So I was just
definitely
curious if you
create a
checked that
mess
out.
for itself, for sure. But it'll fix its own messes eventually. And it might take longer to build certain features because it's creating the spaghettiness that is written into its functions and everything else. But if you just let it run long enough, it'll keep replicating and creating useful functions for itself out of it.
Right. Yeah, hopefully. I'm just lost for words. Everything's just going so fast. I'm a little worried, but this is the machine economy. This is the digital economy. This is the creation of just something completely new, something that from sci-fi films almost. It's really exciting to see, but also a little bit scary at the same time.
And I see Peanut elevating to the speaker, so if you want to chime in there, feel free.
Hey, you guys, what's going on? Happy Thursday. Wanted to jump in, say what's hi, or say what's up, say hi, excuse me. No, great conversation to me. I think it's interesting too, hearing and, seeing a lot of my timeline from different people in crypto Twitter are going full board with the Mac Minis and the studios and building all sorts of cool things. It's been interesting. Seeing the type of, I would say, the shift that's happened probably over the last 5 or 6 weeks, maybe give or take. And while it's great, it's impactful for sure. Seeing what people can build in a couple of days and seeing the impact that, let's just say, like in a week, people are able to construct and build these different tools and resources that can immediately have an impact on their life. It's pretty freaking insane to think, let's say like 10, 15, 20 years ago, what it would take to have the same impact that the tech and resources are currently having. Oh my gosh, like I couldn't even imagine like the time and effort that it would take to duplicate the same results again years prior. And so while that's great in itself, and I think that's a very real reality for a lot of people, at the same time, as I've started to venture a little bit into like vibe coding and doing different things I really haven't worked on in the past, it gets me to think how important it is to think like 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 steps ahead to and having the proper constraints, the proper variable, the proper variable set in place, because if not, AI as a whole, or we talk about different agents or different tools, resources, different learning language models, they're going to just operate in what it decides is best, or whatever that rationale factor is to make certain decisions. And so I've learned firsthand, and I'm trying to tie it back to the topic at hand, because yeah, we can build substantially faster, but is it being done in a smart way? Again, you have to, like I said, you have to think ahead several steps. You have to put those parameters, those boundaries in place. Otherwise, you could get something completely different, as we've all seen and know, than what the actual like intent or end goal is. So that's something I've been challenged by other people too, and that's something I've tried to challenge myself as well, as try and think through things before just jumping into something like haphazardly, or like emotionally. Be proactive about it, think through some things, plan it out, lay it out, and then move forward with whatever it is that you're passionate about and want to see brought to life.
Yeah, that's something that I was discussing earlier, is if you're building a piece of software, what we used to do is create a plan that's, this is going to be the first version, and we're going to add these features in the second version. We're going to have a third version, a fourth version. We're going to have all these things rolled out over the course of 1 to 5 years. And this is what we need to do. This is how it's going to work. Here are all of the virtual screens that is going to be user flow. This is all the infrastructures we're going to use. And all of that's been thrown out the window for a lot of people, because they didn't go to school. They didn't learn how to build software. They're not fully aware of like how they could build the best way. And I think that is definitely something that should be more educational, especially for vibe coded products, because it would help. Because the people teaching all of these AI models are people who went to school for making these pieces of software. And they're the ones who are basically having an impact on your own code, of how things are progressing as we teach these models to be smarter.
It's like people didn't go through the wax on, wax off stage. No, it's interesting to see, I think. And there's also like, so on the other side, just because you build something doesn't mean people are going to come and people need it. So that just business fundamentals, there's on one side, you need to build something people want. And on the other side, you need to know how to speak to a computer, prompt engineering, context mapping, and all of these things. And then also, just like you said, UX, UI, what is the user flow? What is your intention? What features you're going to start off with? And yeah, I wonder, maybe it'd be fun to create like a prompt that acts as a course almost and takes people through this whole thing before they start building. It might increase the probability of a successful output. I think that would be a cool thing to design.
Yeah,
Probably wouldn't take very long with AI.
That's for sure something that we could build into our software. But what we typically recommend is you just go to ChatGPT and tell it what you want to build and tell it to plan it for you. And it spits out like a 5 to 20 page document that outlines all of that. And it usually does really well. And then you just refine it from there. And then you just take all of that and input it into our software, and it basically spits it into the AI. And that's something that we really like about Google's model, is that you can give it so much context compared to other models, like an unfathomable amount of context compared to other models. And it's inexpensive comparatively as well. It makes it so you can build much better software. And that has been since like, I think we've been testing it since 2.5 and 2.5 Pro. And people were complaining that it doesn't make smart software, but I think people just didn't understand how to use it. Because when you give it deep context into what you want to build, or full context into your code base, like it was much more explicit than any of the other models. Like GPT, which is like 10, 20 times the cost of Gemini, would always goof off and create things that were not part of the prompt and just doze off and do something stupid. And it still does that. It's just a much more creative model, which I don't think is as useful.
That makes sense. And this is just for me, but sounds like you used a lot of the different models. I'm curious which one's your favorite, or which one you tend to go for the most. I like Claude's personality, for example, but I also like GPT for different tasks, bigger tasks. What do you think?
I think if you're going to do like a chatbot or create documents that need to be professional, but also consumable, ChatGPT or OpenAI's models are probably the best. Claude, I haven't tested the newest models, but I've heard they're really good, especially as like a co-pilot. I wouldn't say so much for like vibe coding, but if you're building something in VS Code and you already have a code base going, you just need to fix certain small pieces of it, Claude does really well for something like that. And for us, specifically at AppLayer, like we're heavier on Gemini's model because one, it has a really optimized cost for us, and you can provide it tons of context. So for someone who doesn't know how to code, we can feed it tons of data to basically make it so when you build something or tell it to build something, it has less chance of goofing up and making it perfect.
Perfect. Have you heard of any of the other models or use any other models like Kimchi or I don't know, there's a bunch out there. Just curious.
Yeah, we tested a ton of them. There was like an Alibaba model, I think it's QN.
Oh, really? Okay.
We've tested local models. I actually fried a CPU testing some local models. I like fried my PCI controller, my processor. That was a fun time. But nothing really compares to some of these top models, in my opinion. And that's why we didn't even bother to create our own model. Like we could adjust things for existing models. Like you could host your own OpenAI model and then teach it yourself. You could do the same thing with Gemini. Like any of the big models that are hosted on cloud can be taught. But some of the smaller models that you can run locally on your computer, Claudebot is an example. It's very good at talking, but I wouldn't say it's the best at coding because it just doesn't have all of those parameters and training reference that these large models that need data centers to be able to operate. And for us, like it just makes more sense to use a centralized model. And even the decentralized models don't compare. There's people hosting what we would consider a local model that could be hosted on one H100 or H200 that could be hosted in like your garage, for example, or your computer lab. But even those don't compare to the likes of GPT or Gemini.
And maybe Grok.
Grok, I love for
But, yeah.
creativity. So I'll be trying to come up with like fun new ideas, and Grok is unparalleled for coming up with something fun.
Yeah, they all seem to have their own use cases. It's nice to hear from you. I'm personally just starting to use Claude, and yeah, like I have different use cases for them now. ChatGPT, like you said, more professional document sound and stuff. For Claude, it's funny. I actually used Claude to build courses for myself. I have a better chatting experience with Claude personally, and better tutorial experience with Claude. I also think it has access to newer data, but I'm not sure about that being facts. It's just it seems that the instructions I get from Claude give me more up to date, like more recent updates and things from software.
Yeah.
ChatGPT gives me like an older version.
That would be something interesting for me to test. Something that I've been thinking would be useful is like having like a terminal with a chat bot basically controlling it. And I think there's some products that exist for that. They're not very popular, but as like a system admin, which is a core part of my job, like I'm constantly going back and forth, trying to solve problems, talking to an LLM. Hey, it did this. I've never seen this before. What are the next steps?
Yeah.
Like you could just have it directly connected to your terminal and just have it go through those steps. And maybe Claude would be the best for that.
Yeah, actually, I connected. I don't know if this is similar to what you're talking about, but I connected Claude to my OpenClaw, and like I've just been messing with OpenClaw the last few days. But I literally asked OpenClaw to tell me step by step the solutions, and it's Claude responding, and it seems to do okay. But I still sometimes, just so I don't waste tokens, copy paste the context or the command prompts into Claude and then ask Claude in its own native software or its own native window.
Yeah, like I'm thinking like you have a terminal that is SSH into a server, and that server could be getting some weird errors or like a system's down or like a process is saying, and it just provides all of that data to the LLM, and then the LLM's like, all right, here's what we need to do next, and it just automatically fixes it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. That'd be a cool idea. Okay, I get it. Cool, man. All right, so I have one final question out of the box before we start closing this down. And if anyone in the audience has any final questions, comments, please, you're all welcome. But all right, Michael, if AI could build anything instantly, which it basically can, what is the ideal software building workflow look like for you? I feel like we went over it, but I think that was one of the best takeaways. Would love to hear just a succinct version of it.
So end to end, like any idea, it doesn't have like no example of an idea, or
End to end, any idea? Just what workflow do you recommend for people to take?
yeah, like you got to plan before you even go to build the software for sure. That's definitely the big thing. So like creating an implementation plan, looking into the future, what are the features that you want, but don't necessarily need to be in that first version of the software. But because it has context of that, it's going to build for those features in the future. And that's a huge problem that we see a lot with vibe coded software is that you don't tell it that you want to have these features in the future. And it basically creates that issue where you implement the feature and it creates a whole list of bugs and issues because it just wasn't built for those features. That's definitely the first piece. And the second piece is figuring out how you want to build it, what makes most sense for different pieces of the infrastructure. Like you could ask the LLM, hey, what would make most sense to implement this database? And give it context of what is going in the database, what kind of data is being held there. A lot of this is the planning of and makings of what is going to go into the implementation part. So I would say we need to shift backwards and teach or go through the motions of how are we going to create the software rather than create the software. Because the AI can create the software, but can it create it in a smart way? And in most cases, it just rushes to give you a result. And you can actually see it as it's going through its prompt. It'll be like, all right, they didn't tell me they want live data, so I'm just going to give them dummy data. And didn't tell me that I need to make any of these buttons functional, so I'm just going to put dummy buttons here. And it didn't tell me that we need to have any login, so I'm not going to implement the login. But you wanted all of that. And that needs to be detailed because otherwise it's just going to skip right to what it can build quickest. And that is the current state of AI. And so if you do proper planning, like the four P's or the 8 P's, I forget the whole acronym, but it's perfect proper planning or something like, or something about piss poor results.
Yeah. Proper planning prevents piss poor performance.
There you go. With the P's, the famous P's, I think it's the 6 P's, you can build much better and more performant products for sure.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. If anyone has any questions, now's the time. Otherwise, I like to open the floor at this point for you to share briefly where people can find you, what you're building, when they can expect, or what they can expect in the near future. Let us know, App Layer. or Michael.
And if there's no one who has questions, we will be launching a more open version of our AI product pretty soon. It's a more perfected version based on hours and hours, hundreds of hours of feedback from a lot of our community members. We basically have fine-tuned it to the point where you can just come to us with an idea and it deploys the smart contract. The smart contract gets integrated into your app, and your app can be deployed in a matter of seconds or minutes. And we have a lot of examples of that. Like, we just deployed a test app on Binance Smart Chain with some app layer backend pieces. And yeah, it's really easy to use, and we'll be rolling that out really soon. You'll see some invites through our socials, through some referral codes. So just keep an eye out. They'll probably be in the coming weeks.
Awesome. I'm super excited for that. All right. Thanks so much for hopping on, man. Really appreciate you, Michael. To be honest, this has been one of my favorite spaces. I feel like I learned a lot. So thank you for your time. Next space, where I think it's going to be Stud Home as our guest. So please come on, ask any questions. We'd love to have all of you back on. And I'm just going to close it out by saying thanks again.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. See everyone again soon. Bye.
See you guys later.